So as I continue, I want to share. Finding this was amazing. It's right there. Project Pennsylvania explains everything that we've been going through. Families who've been asking the questions like, why is it we can't talk about something? Well, because we didn't have the information available to us. Now it is. And now when I look at the years of abuse associated with foster care, associated with what we've been going through, and asking the right questions right now is relevant. We had families' lives jeopardized. I mean, I was having nerve pain. I was having physical, and when I was just thinking on this earlier about sympathetic pain, how someone can experience pain. I don't physically have to go through something to know someone has been abused. When I share with you guys about sympathetic pain, I was talking to a Pittsburgh police officer less than a year ago about this very topic. Why it is we're concerned, why we're addressing the concern. It doesn't have to happen to me for it to impact somebody. Just like when you read a news story or you watch a story, it can impact you depending on who it is. You don't know necessarily who the victims are, but you have a pretty good idea as you get through all this and you realize that why it is we went all this just to understand what this is about. All these issues. Now, do I know specifically what that is? Not necessarily. It doesn't mean that this stuff doesn't come out in therapy. It does. Something happened where somebody was abused. Somebody close to us has been going through something. And it's a very big reality when you think in terms of what oftentimes talk about the voice of the voiceless and the wilderness period we've been in. Meaning we were thrown out there in an area that we weren't even familiar with. Let me explain to you guys what we went through. We were in the field. We were thrown out there with nowhere to go, nowhere to turn to, no food, no clothes, no nothing. And to not be able to have resources or anything available, left in freezing temperatures, it all comes back to who was targeted here. Who are they targeting? When they look at this, this information led us all through this just to get here, just to learn what we're going to learn here. I believe that whatever information is going to be made available or go public, whoever's going to go public about some of the assault cases, we might find out about not only what happened to me in 1985 and families like myself. I would include Cherry Mahan's family if they would like to attend this. I think we're going to get some answers. Maybe for the first time we might have some real answers here about missing and abductions that occurred over this period. I want to share with you guys some of the things that we went through in 1976. I was at my kindergarten classroom. I remember what it was like to walk away from a Catholic school that morning. I remember what that was like that day. I will illustrate to you that most of the victims, while we were too young to understand what happened, I'm very, very keen enough to remember specifically what that day was like. I remember what that day was like because for some reason something happened in that coat room. And I remember having friends at 5 and 6 years old and why we had the problems we had. And then when I look at all this, it makes too much sense. It's totally clear to me as an adult now. I can understand why we had the problems we did. When I saw my friends in sex abuse therapy, I realized that not just me, many children like myself, and in fact, there were victims that were coming up to me in 1990, and here we are, the very location where I was approached about child sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. I was approached right there at 402 Washington Street in 1990. So to be here right now, looking at this post, to be here at this very moment, to me, it's very real. This is a reality, the trauma, child sexual abuse, the nightmares, and everything right now, finally, for the first time, might make some sense. No one even shared that information to me either. All I can tell you is that as I got older and I come to realize what we went through as children, and now we're adults. I'm almost 50 years old now. Uh, most of my friends are in their mid 40s, almost approaching 50 now, and we're looking at this, and it is as clear to me as if it happened in 1976. Some of us were approached. Some of us are aware that that sympathetic pain is real. Let me share with you more. Okay, so taking back to what happened in 1976, my mom and dad bought a house. I remember that day. I remember what it was like. I remember what my mom was saying to me at that moment. We were just kind of taking in the sights. We were going down to the TikTok restaurant. It was a Saturday morning. And most of us who grew up in Pittsburgh or grew up around this area were pretty aware that there were things going on, but no one like talked about this type of stuff that we're talking about right now. Most of us who were going to school, we were just kind of goofing around, riding our bikes. And we had pretty much a relatively, whatever you call normal childhood. Most of us who didn't get to ride bikes, or we didn't have a chance to go out and do the things, it wasn't because, we were robbed of a childhood. We didn't have the money. We had a large family, etc., etc. What I do remember, though, I cannot forget that day. I cannot forget some of the experiences we had that day, because as soon as we left Hillsdale, that's when things started to change for some of us. We were approached several times. And as you get older, you start to realize how many times people have approached us about some things. And this, we're talking about kids. We're talking about, elementary level. Because I know that some of my friends were abused. I know. I know they may not have shared it. They might get into specific things, but I can say this now that this stuff is coming out in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Back in Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Now that it's coming out, I'm not surprised at all. I'm not surprised that most of us have been sexually abused at all. In fact, the more the information that comes out, the more it makes sense. Because as we get older, we're going to start remembering more and more. The thing is, thankfully, some of us have gotten help sooner and quicker. Because I'll be honest with you, having been sexually assaulted is not the way I chose to live. And I know for a fact that's not the way my brother chose to live. That's not the way my sisters choose to live. It's just there is too many people talking in our ear. We got to listen to the right people. I will say to you guys one thing. I know about my brothers and sisters. When we were kids, we all relatively got along for the most part. It's just we had so many adults saying things to us and telling us things. And truthfully, it's easier to believe a lie than it is to believe the truth. And there are loving relationships. There are people that care, that care about what happens. They're supportive, they're understanding, and they're more than willing to be there to support our family members or relatives or anyone who was confronted, whether it be sexual abuse or something was told to them. Maybe there needs to be some clarity. Maybe we need to talk. Maybe we need to sit down and really talk about what this is about. Because this has been going on. This trafficking case, this drug and sex trafficking case, most of us were unaware for most part. I think, and a lot of times, most of us probably didn't know, but many of us were approached and weren't even fully aware that somebody was trying to pull some bull. So just know this. When you have a mom, dad, and sister, and members of your community that are coming out strongly opposing what the Catholic Church and some of the members of some of the community, whatever was going on here, we're going to find out more as time goes on. We're going to get to the bottom of a lot of things. What I find very difficult is the fact that anyone ever got into punishing anyone. And there needs to be ample information and reports. I have filed reports. We have filed applications. We filed letters. We've written letter after letter to representatives about this very issue. And now, thankfully, this information is out there. And whatever resources you need, whoever you are, wherever you're at, if these matters are addressed quickly, the better it is. We cannot go one more day living this way. Our family members have been impacted personally by abuse. And there's no question in my mind that most of us were innocent kids approached. And now that we're older and we are aware of what's going on, we can do something to change it. Now, for part two, the questions I have about what happened that day. Because I remember February 19th, 1985. Me and my brothers and sisters were bundled up in a blanket that night. There was no heat. The only thing that kept me and my family warm was the bathtub. We were freezing. There was no warm anything. The only thing we had that night was the blankets and a bath, a hot bath. Everything else was freezing over. We had roaches coming out of every area of the house. And I'll continue with this. And that the next day, my mom and I were having an argument. And my mom says, you can go to foster care if those idle threats that sometimes parents say and they don't realize that they're saying it and they say things that they apologize. Parents need to apologize to some of their kids. This is the sex trafficking ring that has been working overtime on us. It's right there front and center. We've been trafficked and victims of sexual abuse the whole time. I have 1,000,001 questions for everyone that like to sit us down. I want you all to see this right now. This is what we lived through. This is what we had to go through. There are going to be answers. First, I want to share how traumatized we were. How we were traumatized and we were forced into situations we did not want to be in. This is totally against my will. Totally against whatever I believe. And do you know how many times we paid fines and lived on the street over this? We don't want answers right now. We want answers. The years of sexual abuse and trauma. I have blacked out several times over this. I was diagnosed with PTSD over this at 14 years old. I walked in and heard the screaming children. I heard screaming children the whole time. So somebody better explain why our vehicle and why we were trafficked the whole time in Pennsylvania. We were told we were crazy and they were putting us in institutions here, all through Pennsylvania. Look at what some of you people have been responsible for. I want to know what happened to our vehicle and our property. We were used in trafficking cases. They were raping us the whole time. They better show up with our vehicle and quit trafficking and abusing and trapping us this way.